In a world increasingly driven by digital transactions, plastic cards, and cryptocurrencies, it's easy to forget the simple power of human connection. What if, instead of swiping a card or tapping an app, you could rely solely on your ability to barter, trade, and trust in the kindness of strangers to get from one end of a country to the other? This was the idea behind my journey, to cross an entire country without spending a single cent. No cash, no cards, just trade items, favors, and stories as my only currency. The mission was simple in design but complex in execution. Start with something small, maybe even nothing at all, and move from one coast to the other, relying entirely on the goodwill of people I met along the way. I chose Portugal for this experiment. Its manageable size, rich culture, and hospitable people made it the ideal setting for a social experiment in generosity and human resourcefulness. From the beach town of Porto to the golden coast of Faro, this is the story of how I made it across a country by trading no money involved. Day 1. Porto. A pocket full of ideas. Standing at the Atlantic shoreline in Porto, I had nothing but a handwritten note in Portuguese that explained my challenge. The note read, "I'm crossing Portugal by trading. I have no money. Can we trade something small to start?" My first trade? A smile and a postcard. I explained my goal to a cafe owner, who was charmed by the idea. He gave me a freshly baked pastel de nata in exchange for the postcard, and wished me luck. That pastry became my first asset. I traded it to a local artist for a small hand-painted magnet. That magnet went to a tourist for a pocket-sized notebook. The notebook went to a university student for a scarf. By the end of the day, I had bartered my way into a bus ride south with a driver who appreciated the story and wanted to help. Day 2. Coimbra. Books and banter. In Coimbra, a university city steeped in history, I leaned on the local academic culture. I traded the scarf for a used novel, which I swapped with a bookseller for a small lunch and a coffee. A group of students let me crash on a couch in their dorm for the night in exchange for a couple of English tutoring sessions and helping someone with a research summary. We stayed up late talking about travel, philosophy, and favorite books. The room warmed with camaraderie. One student offered to show me the university's historic library, and I felt like I had stepped back in time. In just 2 days, I began to realize that value isn't just material knowledge. Stories and time are just as tradable. My journey was starting to feel like a tapestry of shared lives woven one thread at a time. Day 3. Tomar, Faith, and Firewood. In the charming town of Tomar, I met an elderly couple who ran a small rural inn. I traded my help stacking firewood and fixing a leaking garden hose for a warm bed and a homemade dinner. We sat together in the evening by a crackling fire, exchanging tales over wine and cheese. They told me stories of their younger days and the changes they had seen in the region. Their kindness was effortless, given not out of abundance, but out of habit. The couple also offered me a lift toward Lisbon the next morning. They didn't need anything in return. "Just send us a postcard when you reach the end," they said. The simplicity of their request stayed with me. It was a quiet kind of generosity, rooted in a belief that life was meant to be shared. Day 4. Lisbon, the city of trades. Lisbon presented new challenges. Cities are faster, more transactional. People are busier, more skeptical. But it's also a place where creativity thrives. On a street in Alfama, I joined a local busker by playing tambourine. We made enough in tips to trade for a simple lunch. I helped the hostel owner create content for their Instagram in exchange for a bed. I translated menus for a family-run restaurant in return for dinner. There was a rhythm to city life, and I learned to dance with it. One of my best trades happened here. A freelance graphic designer offered to drive me to Evora in exchange for helping her write the English version of her website bio. We sat in a cafe for 2 hours, editing and laughing before setting off on the road. That car ride turned into an impromptu podcast as we shared dreams and playlists. Day 5. Evora, history lessons in heirlooms. Evora's Roman ruins and quiet streets slowed down the pace. I traded stories with a local history guide and ended up shadowing her for a day, helping with tourist questions and carrying gear. She let me sleep in her guest room that night and even gave me a pair of gloves when she noticed I was cold. We shared a warm breakfast the next morning, and she told me tales of ancient rituals once performed in the region. In return, I helped her design a better way to guide international tourists using simple English phrases. I left Evora with a second-hand travel backpack she no longer used. That backpack later became a valuable trade item in itself. It was sturdy, reliable, and filled with new purpose. Much like me at that point in the journey. Day 6. Beja, olive oil and open doors. Further south, in the olive-growing region near Beja, I stopped at a family-owned farm. I traded my time picking olives and helping bottle oil in exchange for food and lodging. The family welcomed me like one of their own, sharing stories around a big kitchen table lit by soft lanterns. I learned how to recognize ripe olives by touch and even got a quick lesson in pruning. The family also gave me a small bottle of artisanal olive oil, which I later traded in Tavira for a bus ticket from a driver who loved gourmet cooking. We exchanged recipes, and I promised to try making caldo verde when I returned home. By now, my journey was no longer just about moving forward. I was collecting stories, friendships, and proof that kindness was very much alive. Day 7. Tavira to Faro, the final stretch. Tavira, with its cobbled streets and salt pans, was one of the last stops before reaching Faro. I helped an elderly man carry groceries and fix his garden fence. In return, he gave me a pair of handmade leather sandals. Those sandals, in turn, were traded to a young traveler who had an extra bicycle he wasn't using. I cycled the last stretch to Faro, the Atlantic breeze against my face, heart full. I reached the southern coast, sun dipping below the horizon, and sat with the realization I had crossed a country without money only by trading time, effort, and trust. What I learned: the true value of human currency. This journey taught me more than any transaction ever could. First, people are inherently generous. Not everyone helped, and that was okay. But many did, not for material gain, but because they value being part of something hopeful. Second, value is flexible. What one person sees as trivial, another sees as meaningful. A simple scarf, a handwritten note, a smile, they all became currency in the right context. Third, stories matter. Every trade was anchored in connection, in sharing a bit of who I was and what I was doing. People don't just trade things. They trade trust, trading toward tomorrow. In the end, I crossed Portugal without spending a euro. But I gained something far more valuable. In a time when division often makes headlines, this journey reminded me that bridges are still being built every day, in acts of kindness, in shared meals, in quiet moments between strangers. So the next time you think you need money to go somewhere or do something meaningful, remember, sometimes all you need is an open heart, a good story, and the courage to ask, would you like to trade? If this journey inspired you, show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to follow more human-powered adventures. Got a trade story of your own? Drop it in the comments. Let's remind the world that generosity still travels. The road is open. All you need is your next step.